and welcome to the Everyday Board Game Podcast with Daniel.
And Daniel.
Good afternoon, Daniel.
How's it going?
Not too
Filming
bad.
a little late today, huh?
Yeah, we're filming later today than normal, and we're filming on a Thursday, which is also not normal for us, but...
Honestly, we filmed 3 days this week. This is not normal for us anyways.
Yeah, this is the third day in a row that we filmed. So, good news, we have very few games to talk about that we've played. In fact, 0 for me.
Well, that's also due to the fact that we don't talk about games we played today. That's usually for what we recorded yesterday.
Right, exactly. So, we're going to be going straight into the top 8 debate, which is good because that's normally our longer episodes anyway.
It's one of our, if not our longest. I think the last one clocked in at almost 2 hours.
Yeah, so we're going to try and do it a little faster than for this week. So this week was a really cool topic. I like this one a lot. You, not so much, but that's because I just like these style of games. That was, what are the top 8 games, our top 8 debate is games made last century, through 1990 through 1999. So no chess, no Mancala coming over here. But we have designer board games that were made last century.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a tough one, especially when coming to honorable mentions and stuff like that. I had a hard time. And just going to go ahead and let everybody know. I was showing you my show notes that I was building for myself for the script, and we both ended up seeing my honorable mentions.
Uh-huh.
And we found it hilarious that both of all our honorable mentions are the same honorable mentions and
Right.
landed in the same exact spots.
Yeah. So when we go through our honorable mentions, we're going to go through them one by one, and we'll just both talk about the same one because they're the same thing. So
our same 3 honorable mentions, yeah. Normally we try to keep it hidden from each other, but I was just explaining to him, like, I like to use show notes for myself, and this is what I did, and it just so happened to have my honorable mentions. He's like, huh.
I noticed something's interesting. Yeah. So, but before we do that, let's talk about the honorable mentions brought by the voters. We posted our normal 8, and we allowed other people to do it, and one of them very quickly rose to number 1.
Oh, yeah, but we didn't add this. We both have played this specific game. However, it wasn't a tabletop game, and it wasn't on BGG.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. It's not considered a board game. That's because it's an RPG. And so let's bring it up. Michael added Dungeons and Dragons, which had 45 votes.
Oh man, that thing just jumped up there really quick.
Yep.
And I ain't okay with it. I'm not an RPGer myself. I'm a board game. Again, we talked about it in the last episode. I'm relatively new in the board game world, so Magic the Gathering was during my time, but it was not something I was interested at the time.
Magic the Gathering?
Or
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And, it has its cult following. I've played it a little bit, but I mainly played some of the games that we're going to be talking about later. Added next
was by our mutual friend Nathan, and that is Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, this should have been in my honorable mentions. I just totally forgot about it because I've only played the Fantasy Flight version.
Right.
And, yeah, no, it's a phenomenal game, and I can't fault him for putting that in.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I can't believe I didn't think of it either, but that's the same thing. I used to own one of the old 1990s Mayfair versions, and, the ones that, it has cardboard pieces that are like this thin and look like they're just supposed to be thrown away. They don't look like they're obviously pieces. I remember that one. I had fun with it, and then I got rid of it because I know I want the new good Fantasy Flight version. But,
yeah, the Fantasy Flight one is phenomenal. I've seen the artwork from the old one. It's just kind of like, but it's also in the 70s, so
right.
What do you expect?
Yeah, exactly. And also tied with the same number of votes, 6 votes as well, Kevin added Twilight Imperium. He didn't specify the edition.
Well, Twilight Imperium, the first edition came out, I want to say the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Maybe even later than that. But yeah, it's the first edition that has been reformatted, and now it's on its 4th edition. So
yep.
I think it was Corey Konitski's first game that he ever made.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very cool. And our next one.
Hold on. I was writing some stuff down.
Okay.
Was added by Brian, and that is Shadowrun.
Shadowrun, yep. Now, I don't know if he's if that's specifically Shadowrun the RPG. I think there was something earlier about that. Somebody posted it, but yeah, not the Shadowrun tabletop RPG. It's
Well, see,
Shadowrun
there's
the game.
later on when you get further down, there's something
Yep.
called Shadowrun TTRPG. So
Yep.
I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be.
Yeah. So either way.
So I'm going to go ahead and just add that on our list. Jolene added the tabletop RPG version of Shadowrun.
Yep. Exactly. So thank you both for adding those on. The Shadowrun tabletop RPG got 1 vote, and jumping back up, we have Joe added Tigris and Euphrates with 4 votes, which, true story, is also another Reiner Knizia, one that you have not played, and I do own,
Nope.
and I plan on eventually asking you to play it and then promptly being denied.
Well, again, there's only been one Reiner Knizia game I've actually enjoyed playing thoroughly, so...
Yeah. I mean, maybe you would like this one. I don't know. I saw the Shut Up and Sit Down review of it, and it has me both intrigued and also kind of disappointed, because I get what they're saying. It's kind of convoluted for what it is, but maybe it's not at the same time. It's probably not too bad. Either way.
All right, moving on. We have Mike's honorable mention here, and that is Space Hulk, which I believe this specifically is an RPG. They're just now starting to do tabletop games based on this universe, which is Warhammer 40K.
I think it's Warhammer is the miniatures, but Space Hulk was a board game, I know, at one point, because I used to own a copy of Space Hulk. I never played it.
Corrected.
But yeah, I that's not saying that it's not an RPG or anything else. I just know that it was a big minis game that was the version I had.
Well, I think Space Hulk itself, though, is in the 40K universe.
Oh, okay. That's fair. I'd believe that. The next one we have is Christopher added Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which was back in the 80s and a Spiel des Jahres winner.
And would
Couldn't
have been
agree
on
more.
this list, except for I still haven't played it.
Yep, still haven't played it. You don't own a copy, do you?
No.
Well, I suppose I could lend you something one of these days, but honestly, I don't, knowing the games that you like and that your wife also likes, I don't see this getting to the table realistically.
No, nor do I.
Yeah.
That's why I shook my head.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cool.
So Dave went on and added, with 3 votes as well, is Hero Quest.
Hero
And
Quest.
this one's in the news. I'm surprised they didn't get any more votes than that.
Yeah.
Because they just re-released a copy of it on like Hasbro's Kickstarter version thing.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And Cedric added Dune, which was also reprinted, and now has that Dune Imperium game that's coming out as well.
Yes, the Dune Imperium, though, is relatively new. Dune itself just got a reprint. They had to go through all sorts of licensing stuff just to get it reprinted. And I'm glad it's there. People do enjoy it, but I've looked into it, I've watched it, and it doesn't look like it's something for me.
Right. Yeah, same here.
And we've already talked about that one. So next one is Bill. He went and added Illuminati.
Yep. Couldn't agree more, Bill. Illuminati, I'm surprised I didn't think of that one. It's not one of my favorite games. It's kind of... It's a really funny game, but there is a lot of upkeep with it, and that's always prevented it from hitting my table any further than... I have a probably 80s or 90s version of it. Yeah, it's old. But... And I don't think it's going to hit the table probably anytime soon.
Probably not.
No. Gary also added Pathfinder, which, RPG. That's why it wasn't on the list.
Exactly. So I'm just trying to see if there's any comments that are worth mentioning. Nathan says the reason why he added it is because he said so.
Because he said so. Do you have it listed on all comments?
Yes, I do.
All right, cool. Then I will organize it as well.
I'll go ahead and add here what Dave added, because I think this is actually a good thing he's saying here. He thinks the best games should be games that shaped and defined future generations. Magic the Gathering catapulted and defined TCGs, whilst Dungeons and Dragons defined and catapulted role-playing games. Hero Quest made role-playing accessible to non-role-playing players.
Yeah, that's a brilliant comment. I couldn't agree more. Although I haven't played Hero Quest, but I understand that was a tipping point for a lot of RPG players.
My brothers played it back in the day. I never actually got to play it myself because my parents didn't want me. Really, it doesn't seem like that bad now, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, your parents were a lot more strict when it came to like the barbarian and the Dungeon and Dragon style stuff. And so
Yeah.
my older brothers who were teenagers, it was fine. But for me, who was 5, 6, 7, it wasn't really good artwork for someone like me.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I had a lot of friends who couldn't play Magic the Gathering for that very same reason. Bob, speaking of Magic the Gathering, said, Magic the Gathering is the game that got me deep into fantasy in general. Not only that, it's also a pioneer and the alpha when it comes to strategy games in general. The fact that it's still so popular is a testament to its
Intrinsic.
intrinsic value. I cannot speak right now. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I grew up with it, playing since
No,
I
I
was a
don't
teenager.
disagree. There's a reason why it's been around for nearly 30 years. In fact, what, 2024 will be its 30-year anniversary?
Yep. Yeah, it will.
So, yeah, it's that's a testament. The same with Dungeons and Dragons. It's been around since the 70s.
Hmm.
Now, it's ebbed and flowed more than Magic the Gathering, which Magic the Gathering has been consistent for the 30 years we're talking about.
Yeah.
Where Dungeons and Dragons ebbed and flowed, but it's in pop culture genres now. I mean, Stranger Things really added a revitalization of Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. So much to the point where they even made a Dungeons and Dragons Stranger Things
Yeah.
version. So that's pretty cool. All right. Well, are we ready to debate then?
Yeah, so thank you everybody who put some nominations up there, who voted on our polls, as well as gave us some really good comments there. Again,
Yeah.
if you want to be part of this, every time, about a day or two before we actually film, we put a poll up or a comment section up on Board Game Revolution community on Facebook.
Yeah. And there's a reason we do it also, not just to get more input and honorable mentions, is that these votes that are going towards these games, if you and I can't agree on them, which happens from time to time, more often than probably not, if we can't agree on which one, we go to those votes as a tiebreaker. So your votes are very much beneficial to this debate.
Exactly.
All right. So with that being said, let's talk about the games that are being debated. We pick these the same way every week. We pick a category, mechanism, publisher, something that we can sort this by. Technically, we fibbed it a little bit this time around. On Board Game Geek, what we did this time is we just went every game ranked, and anything that was 1999 or 1990 through 1999 was eligible for the list. So we took the top 8 that were ranked that Daniel and I have both played.
And that took a while. Let me tell you, folks. It took us about 5 or 6 pages because the games that were made in the 90s just didn't come up for a while. It was just like, oy.
Yeah, exactly. Because that was like kind of like the starting of a lot of these games getting popular, a little bit here and there, and then as you could tell later in the 2000s and then 2010s and further, that's when it really started gaining traction.
And not only that, was it not only hard to get the top 8 games, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, it was actually difficult for me to find 3 games for honorable mentions because it just took a while.
Yeah, because you're a cult of the new, yeah.
Mind you, I also got into it in 2014, so I've only been playing modern board games for 6 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am in the cult of the new because I am new.
Because you're new, right? And I'm the kind of player where when I get immersed into a hobby like this, I always go all out, regardless of how old it is. Like when I was collecting playing cards, goodness, I have decks of cards from the 1800s. You know that, like where everybody collects all like the brand new stuff that's coming out, which I have some of those too. I have some right here on my desk, but that's the cult of the new part of it. I'll still go antiques, and I love older ones, and being surprised by it's like, wow, I'm expecting a game from the 50s to be awful, but Sid Saxon just proved me wrong because this stuff like that. So
I'm lucky enough. The things I collect are newer board games. I collect most of the new ones that I like, and then I collect hats. I'm in the process of trying to get every minor league AAA team hat, and except for one because. Screw the Cardinals.
Well, that got angry all of a sudden. Like, goodness. All right. Well, I see that now that you're in a nice competitive mood, let's talk about our rankings.
Alrighty. Sounds good to me.
Today we have our number 1 ranked seed, El Grande.
Facing our 8th ranked seed, Catan.
Okay.
I can't speak today.
Our number 2 seed, Magic the Gathering.
Facing our 7th seed, Pitch Car.
Our number 3 seed, Ra.
Facing our 6th seed, Lost Cities in the Knizia bracket.
In the Knizia bracket. And our number 4 seed, Acquire.
Facing our 5 seed, For Sale.
In the economic bracket. Oh man, yeah, we have the Euro bracket, the economic bracket, the Knizia bracket, and then Pitch Card Magic.
Which is, I'm going to call the random bracket.
Yeah, the random bracket.
Card play versus...
The expandable bracket. We'll say that.
There you go.
Yeah, why not? Because there's almost an unlimited amount of stuff you could buy for it.
Yeah, except for one's more expensive than the other.
I know.
I'll let you decide which one's which.
Which one are we speaking of? That's up to the viewers. Alright, so as always, let's talk about how we break these down. We have 5 criteria, each with 3 sub-criteria from there. We're not going to get into the details right now. We'll do that as we're debating. But, in a nutshell, we have ease of play is our first criteria. How easy is and likely is it to get to the table?
Sorry, I don't have it pulled up. I'm actually making the draw pile.
Okay, you do that, I'll go through these. Then we have art and production. How much do the graphic design, the art, and the pieces work together as a game? Meaningful choices. How well does your strategy, or how does your strategy impact other players as well as your long-term strategy? And how well can you make non-arbitrary choices? Then we have replay value. What's going to continue to hit that table more and more time again? And finally, game immersion. Which ones are the most thematic? Which ones feel like you're immersed in the experience? And which have the best stand-up moments? So we have those all broken down. And you'll notice us reference, if you're familiar with how we do our top 8 debates, you're already familiar with these criteria that we've hashed out throughout the years. Or the year.
Years?
The year.
Mind you, this year has felt like multiple years.
It has. This has been the quickest, longest year that we've ever experienced. And so we're going to reference those a little bit, and you'll see those a lot more in the semifinals and the finals.
Yeah, exactly. And also, just want to reiterate, these are games we both haven't played at least once, so that's why we're doing this, for us to have good arguments.
Yes.
Also, the new thing that we've been doing since we started is that we actually don't pick who's going to get the number 1 seed versus the 8 seed.
Right.
It's a random draw.
Yeah. So then let's talk about our honorable mentions. And I say our honorable mentions because we found out they're the exact same.
Same ones, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about, have I dug more, I probably could have found plenty of other games that would have fit the criteria. Like, I thought about Chaseback, for example.
Yeah, I could have dug more and probably came up with what Nathan had, a Cosmic Encounter. I just didn't. Sure. I saw my 3 games. I'm like, this is already taking me this long. I'm going to stop right here.
Yep, agreed. So our number 3 is a game called Six Nimmt.
Oh, yeah. Just recently played this, too. When we just started playing Board Game Arena, you actually showed this game to me and our mutual friend, Dom, and I actually enjoyed it. Yeah. It's a nice little quick game, card game, which I have not played the physical version of.
Yeah.
But I do like it that you're drawing cards, you're trying to make sure you're not taking or putting the 6th card, or else you have to take all the cards that's in that row.
Yep.
Yeah, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, each card is worth a number of bullheads, as they are. And it's a really neat game how you have these 4 rows that you're trying not to place the 6th card. But sometimes it's good to either place the 6th or to play something that's lower, and so everybody plays at the same time, and then you just play in order. It's one of those neat games that use just the numbers, I think, 1 through 100.
Something like that, yeah.
And use it in a really neat game. So that's Six Nimmt from us.
And the fact that it came out in the 90s and still is actually really fun to play.
Yeah.
Surprising.
I give it, a lot of these games, the honorable mentions, I'm going to give props for how old they are. And the fact that they are this popular and this fun, considering that the further you go back, technically, the worse they're supposed to get, as common knowledge would say. But that's not always true.
Our number 2 game honorable mention is funny because this is probably one of my favorite Uwe Rosenberg games.
Yes. Yep. It's likely mine.
Tell the people what it is.
And that is Bonanza.
Beans!
Bean farming. In an ugly yellow box. It doesn't get much better.
Bean farming.
Bean farming. Yep. But man, is this one of the funnest negotiation games. Like, everything in this game is designed to be fun. Like, you
Yeah,
first have to play cards in order. So you have a bit of push your luck because you want to make each of your farm fields more valuable by adding more beans of the same type to it. But
yeah. You
then,
can't really change the order of your hand either.
yep, yep. So you have to play one or two of the first cards. Then you get dealt two cards, and then the negotiations are there for anybody to work with. You can either take the cards or offer to trade, or people can just be like, no, we don't want those. You can have them. And thus removing one of your other fields and uprooting them all. And then, on top of that, then you have to draw cards and add them to the back of your hand before you sell, thus going, oh, I have this whole field of chili beans. I'll probably sell it this turn. Draw two more. Maybe I'll wait another round. We'll see. It's there's so many good choices every single part of the turn. I love it. You're engaged every turn.
Yeah, it's funny because Uwe Rosenberg likes to go from, hey, I'm making little card games, and now I'm making these heavy board games where you have to feed your people. Oh, wait, now I'm back to these little polynomial games.
Yeah. Now I'm back to polyominoes. Those are kind of his big things. I guess there's card games, his big Euro farming games, heavy Euro
like
games.
Agricola, Caverna,
Yep.
Le Havre.
Le Havre, yep. All of those. And then and then now polyomino games. Oh, Uwe.
Oh man, he's such a prolific designer. It's not even funny.
Yep. And our last one is from one of my personal favorite designers, if not probably my favorite, and we'll be debating one of his games later. That is Sid Saxon, a game from 1984, I believe, which was up for the running of winning the Spiel des Jahres, but didn't win, and that's Can't Stop, the best push your luck dice game ever.
Honestly, this is probably my favorite Sid Saxon game I played.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite Sid Saxon games ever. One of the first, if not the first, push your luck game that really got big.
Yeah, yeah. This was a precursor to Farkle. Farkle is probably the only other one that I can think of that is fairly. I mean, other than Blackjack, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, other than Blackjack, and then technically. And so Can't Stop, yeah, it's a push your luck game. You roll 4 dice. You pair them up into 2 pairs of dice after you roll them on your turn, and you either move or introduce what's called a runner, which is like this tall cone on a stop sign, or like I've seen versions of this where you're climbing a mountain. Your goal is to get 3 to the top first, and if you do, you win. Simple. My goodness, is this a fun game?
Yeah, I remember the first time you showed this to me and my wife. We went to where did we go? It's like IHOP or something like that. We were in a diner, and you just like, hey, let's try this, and we had a good time playing it. And ever since then, I've had nothing but a good time playing this because it's like always like, ooh, should I keep going or should I just stop right here? That puts me in the lead of this section. Do I hold off and try to roll like the lower numbers, have a better chance of getting the higher or lower numbers rather than the 6, 7, and 8? Because they're going to take a longer time to get to it, even though you have a better possibility of getting those rolls. Yeah. So I have a good time playing this one.
Every once in a while I'll try and just shoot the moon. The very first turn I'll try and win, and then if not, then I just go with it from there. But it's always a really exciting thing when you get so close to winning on the first turn. Oh man.
Now just remember what I just said right now. Playing in a diner. That's something you're not able to do in a while.
Well, you're a buzzkill. Let's get to our top 8 debate.
No, the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I listened to a actual hilarious commercial today on the radio. I was driving, and it's like, I think it was like for like a wood sealant or something like that, and it's like, let's listen to the whole thing in time, and they're like, Wilson, party of 4, Wilson, party of 4. Oh, there you are. And I'm like, aw, that's both funny and it hurts a little.
Yeah, right? I know, I haven't been to a restaurant in months, and that was one of my favorite pastimes.
Yeah.
I loved it. Oh well, what can you do?
What can you do? Hopefully, when everything settles down, we can start doing normalcy again.
Exactly. But until then, this pandemic brought to you by Everyday Board Games. Or Everyday Board Games brought to
because we couldn't hang out.
Exactly. So let's get to the debate. So welcome back. Sorry about that quick break.
To our re-upload people on YouTube and as well as the audio listener, it won't seem like that much of a break, if at all.
Yeah, yeah, we're probably going to be editing that out, but we just wanted to let you guys know what happened. I had to leave yesterday, something came up, and we are back to filming today. So we
So
are,
for our YouTube watchers, that's the reason why we're in different clothes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it'll look a little different, but that's all right. That's all right. I mean, yesterday I was wearing a gray shirt anyway, and we're colorblind, so this tie dye. I mean, it's practically the same thing, right?
Yeah, that is true.
I
And
think that's how that works.
you can hardly see what I'm wearing. You only see my shoulders and my hat. So
Right.
yes, I'm wearing a different hat.
That's true. You are wearing a different hat. All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get back to the argument. We made some pretty good points on El Grande, and I believe we were talking about Catan at the time.
So we're gonna go ahead and just restart this argument. So go
Okay.
ahead and go back to your El Grande pitch, and then we'll get going.
All right, so El Grande, the game, kind of one of the biggest Euros that came around. It was not, of course, as big of a hit as Catan, but let's talk about how ahead of itself it was. It was made in the 90s. It had area control, which was not super uncommon. I mean, there was stuff like Risk, but in the German market, that was very uncommon to have like something similar to a conflict, even though not really. The direct
And not only
conflict.
that, with the fact that they pretty much eliminated like dice roll for the conflicting purposes of it. It's just
Right.
whoever has the most dudes in this one area wins.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't, it's not eliminating anybody. It's just, do I have more? Yes, good. And so different regions will score in different parts of the rounds and for different amounts. Of course, the longer that you're able to keep your dudes on there, the more points they might be in or worth at the end of the game. That's not super uncommon, but the card play is what makes this really intriguing. The card play tells you how many workers you get, and then it also tells you what kind of action you can take. And then so you're going to be using a combination of taking these actions, moving your people around, moving the Grande, which is a massive, huge pawn, and basically trying to control the most valuable areas. You and I played as a two-player game, and that was the last time you and I have played it. But we've enjoyed it. I I still want to get it back to the table very soon. There's
Oh yeah,
also
we immensely enjoyed this one.
yeah
I didn't think I was gonna like it. I do have to say though, this game, and I mentioned it when we were sort of recording yesterday. This game needs a modern new art upgrade because
yeah.
I think this would go hand in hand with today's society because it still plays that well. There is a reason why it's the number one seed. It's still that good of a game.
Do you think, and this is kind of like alluding to our next week chits and giggles, do you think that this would be really good to retheme it to a completely different setting instead of historical?
I mean, it could. It could work with that, but the historical aspect of it is actually pretty neat. I don't know, honestly. I think if you left it as is with its theme that's on it, it's fine as long as you upgrade like the components and the massively needed upgrade for artwork.
Yeah,
Because mind you, this is a game from what 94, 95, somewhere around
something
there,
like that. Yeah,
and it's done really well for so long, but it's doesn't meet today's standards that people have for when it comes to how the game is supposed to look.
right. And I want to say it. I think it's just specifically the artwork. The components themselves, like the dials, the meeples are fine. The tower is actually a big, thick tower that stays together. You know,
Yeah,
the giant El Grande pawn, like everything works, and the card quality is good. I think it's just the art design, and mainly specifically the cover. The board itself isn't even that bad, even though it's washed with like a brown and it's all sepia
yeah, no,
tone.
I think the board needs to be changed, especially for like colorblind, unfriendly
Yeah,
games. This is one of those that you have to be watch out for because, as you said, the meeples and everything are fine,
yeah,
but they need a better color on them. So, like, if
right,
you're gonna go for you and me both, we're both red green colorblind. If you separate the tones of the red green, we have a better chance of seeing them. So, like, if you make a dark red with a light green or a bright green,
hmm,
we'll see it a lot better than if we see a dark green with a dark red. It's
yeah,
a bit complicated. So that's what I'm talking about, like changing the component wise,
yeah.
making it more friendly, less browns. Seriously, Spain, which is in the Iberian Peninsula, is not that ugly. Make it pretty. Show Iberia as it should be.
Yeah, okay, I can agree with that. But other than that, I think it's a phenomenal game.
No, I don't disagree, and that was one of my cons is that it's just not as immersive compared to other games as well. It's not conducive that I'm this count in this colony over this county over here,
Mm-hmm.
trying to vie for the control of Aragon or this and that. It's
Yeah.
just it's not as massive. You're just moving cubes and playing cards. Is what it is. It's not as immersive as compared to some other games.
Right.
But other than that, between the look and the immersion, that's really the only knock I can give this game. It's that phenomenal.
Cool. All right. So what's your argument for Catan?
So for me, my argument for Catan is, as I've stated many times before, this is a very familiar game outside of gaming. You see this in pop culture. You see this in TV shows. There's memes about sheep for wheat in this game. From this game.
Yeah.
This is a game that came out in '94, won the Spiel in '95. This came out around the same time as Magic the Gathering. And what Magic the Gathering did for trading card games here in America and as well as the world, this did to European Euro-style games in Europe and bringing it over to America. And it just went up gangbusters. This is, you mentioned it when we tried recording earlier, the third highest selling board game ever.
Yeah. Yep.
Ever.
Third only to Scrabble and Monopoly.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's saying something. Monopoly, which is basically in almost every household, at least everybody knows about Monopoly because they played it when they were younger.
Yep.
Not by the real rules, but...
Well, minor details.
Scrabble was another big thing about back in the day, too, because, spelling and reading, and a lot of people use Scrabble to help their kids learn how to read and spell and stuff like that. Whereas Catan, you're just trading and moving and rolling some dice and stuff like that. It's not really, you wouldn't think it's that big. And you got to look at the fact here is we're talking about Monopoly, which came out the 20s.
Yes.
Scrabble,
yeah, I think so.
The 60s.
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, that sounds about right. 50s or 60s.
But then you have Catan, which is the third best-selling game.
1994.
Out in the 90s.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of good games that people talk about between then and say Scrabble.
Yeah.
And it's still that popular. I mean, we've had articles about sports teams playing this game.
Right.
So, I have to say, I'm not a fan of this. I prefer El Grande, honestly. If I had to take my bias into this, I would pick El Grande. But the fact that this has reached the levels that it has, to the point where everybody knows this game along the lines of Monopoly, that says how important this game is in the last 40 years or so.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. If we were to break it down, I mean, ease of play goes to Catan, in my opinion, because that's very simple. Roll some dice, get some cards. Art and production, I mean, the production, I think, goes to El Grande. That's not to say that... I mean, the art is fine in Catan. It's still bland, but it's a Euro, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean...
But meaningful choice is El Grande, and replay value. Ooh, that's tricky, because Catan has expansions for expansions.
Yeah.
Let me state that again. It has expansions for expansions.
For expansions.
You have the 5 and 6 player expansion for the base game, but then you also have the Seafarers of Catan expansion, but then you have the 5 to 6 player expansion for Seafarers, and then you have expansions that need 5 to 6 players for the Seafarers, and then it's like a storyline module. It's like, hold on. You have expansions for expansions.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. The only thing that really would come down to me for how this would break down is game immersion.
Mm-hmm.
I just think Catan lends itself to more of that immersion.
In a way, I don't know that I feel like I'm settling in the island of Catan any more than I think, honestly, I'm
we're
controlling...
talking about the themes mechanism. That's fine, but I'm talking about the player interaction when you're... Why are you moving the robber there? Why are you doing this? How would somebody give me a sheet for my wheat? Come on! That kind of stuff tends to lend itself more to those memorable moments as well as those player interactions. That's why I think game immersion would go to Catan for that reason.
I agree with you for that, but as far as memorable moments, I think that's more El Grande. When you lift the tower and you see the secret, the area control there and where the Grande mover is moving.
I have an argument against what you're saying,
Yeah,
and I agree that, I mean, that's cool and all. But every time you show this at the shop, there's always been people getting loud, getting rambunctious, yelling at each other. There's more stand-up moments I've seen when I'm not even playing the game in a game of Catan than I have in the one game I played of El Grande. And in fact, I've seen more people play Catan and have stand-up moments than, say, El Grande.
sure. Okay, so then sounds like we're agreeing that Catan moves on.
I don't disagree. As much as I would prefer El Grande, I think Catan is overall the better game.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against its stature in the field of board games. So
No, I don't disagree. So Catan will probably be taking our lowest seed if it's going to be Magic, which it's Magic. So we just argued the historical context of Catan, and Magic is right there with it.
right, right, because it's almost impossible to quantify how many games of Magic have been sold, because
Yeah.
that's not possible. But with that being said, let's go to our next round. Daniel, this will be your pick, whichever one is picked at random, and you'll start our arguments. This is between Magic the Gathering or Pitch Car.
All right. So my argument is pitch car.
All right, go for it.
So I'm going to be honest here. I'm not a fan of Magic the Gathering, not because of the game itself, but because of the. I've said it before. It's not the game's fault. It's the community that it harvested, and it has gotten better. But I've only just recently played Pitch Car, and oh my god, I had fun playing this game.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put you down, but like you didn't have or you didn't do a very good job,
Oh
myself included.
no,
I didn't do a very good job either, but we had a
I kept going
blast.
off track and stuff like that, but we were having such a good time when we finally did play this. This was what, a couple months ago?
Yeah, probably.
Well, we all finally got to play it, and so the thing I have here for Pitch Car is that it's a fun dexterity game. In all honesty, I mean,
No.
I've come to find out when it comes to dexterity, I like flicking games. I love tumble dice, and this one's fun. I suck at it. I suck trying to get that curve that you want. It's probably need more practice and stuff like that with it. But I have such a blast with this game. And we played it that one time, and we played it on the basic track, and I sucked, and I came in last place, but
But
it
who
was
cares?
still really fun. It led to a lot of table talk, laughter. I mean, we were trash talking left and right. They kept yelling at me to stay on the track.
Yeah.
And I could see this as one of the better games for party situations. This
Yeah.
is something that when you
Oh, yeah.
finally can get in big groups, like Thanksgiving, say in 2021, when everything's safe and you can get to your big family gathering, I think everybody could play this game. Grandma to son and daughters, all you're doing is flicking little pieces across the track. And there is difficulty to it, but I think everybody would still have a great time with it. And that's why I think Pitch Car is such a phenomenal game.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I just think that it's only a party game. I mean, which it really. I mean, it's a dexterity. It's not trying to be anything other than that. So I'm not trying to knock it down for that. But that's all it is. And so, going against one of the heavier strategy games, and this has, I think, the highest votes out of our list, with the exception of D&D.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, and that's because a lot of people who got into board games because of either Tabletop with Will Wheaton or one of the other two, Dungeons and Dragons or Magic. And I was one of the
I don't
Magic the
disagree.
Gathering players. Yeah. I mean,
You have to also put the caveat that when we're talking about like America and stuff like that, the United States,
Yes.
because there's games like Catan that got people into modern board gaming in
Sure.
Europe because of Catan.
Yeah. Yeah, with until the Euro game explosion, until Catan really hit the market, Magic was the thing.
Yeah.
And everybody knew it. Like you brought in the cultural icon of Catan, which I agree with, but I mean, when I remember growing up where it's like, "Oh, what's your hobby?" and I say Magic, and I had to clarify whether it was prestidigitation or the card game, because it was that ingrained into people. If you say Magic, there's a lot of things that could apply towards, and the card game being the most likely one assumed of people in my
Not just
age group.
that. I mean, someone mentioned it in the comments yesterday when we were going through the poll.
Yeah.
Magic redefined not just what is is it the generic fantasy,
Yep.
but it also redefined the trading card game to the point there was a lot of Magic clones
Yeah.
coming out in the late 90s and early 2000s.
It wasn't necessarily the first, although it kind of was. Um,
It
it
was the
it
first to blow up.
it was the first and still the only one really. Like there's a couple that are still kind of popular. Netrunner just finished, but that was started
Uh,
off as a TCG created by Richard Garfield, the same way that Magic was. But Pokemon, I think, is played still. Maybe some
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yu-Gi-Oh. Yeah,
Yu-Gi-Oh is still played.
yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh is still really popular.
And if Magic wasn't created, those wouldn't be a thing.
What else? Ashes, Rise of the Fever Port is being brought back because there's a want for it
Yeah.
because of Magic.
Yep.
There's a want for these card games because of Magic. People are like, I don't want to play Magic because of, as I mentioned earlier, the community where it's not as welcoming. But with these newer ones like Ashes that we've talked about, they're a lot more inclusive because they're still new. They're
Yeah.
not ingrained like some of these other communities, which
Right.
could be a good and a bad thing.
Yeah, all of these ones like Keyforge and all these other card games have that to thank. And a lot of them were created because they were like, "Oh, well, let's take Magic and let's add some twists to it that I would want to do." And then the designers create a brand new game that is based off of the card game that they grew up and loved. So,
So I mentioned some stuff real quick before we go into who we decide. But both my cons for both of these games is both could be really expensive depending on what you're doing with it.
yes.
Magic the Gathering, it's been told like back in 2015 or something like that. It was a $300,000 deck that ended up winning the entire
Something
tournament.
something dumb like that. Yeah.
And then pitch car. If you want like the expansions and the loops and stuff like that,
Mhm.
you're looking at easily, if you want to get everything for pitch car, a couple grand.
Yeah, yeah. But now also on the flip side of the coin, what's the barrier for entry? You could play a promo deck for like $5 of commons,
Yeah, no, that's not
and you
that
can
bad.
play
That's
it, right?
actually how a lot of. I don't want to equate it to like drugs, but that's pretty much what they do. They give you a little sample size,
Yeah.
and then they get you hooked.
Yep. But then also on the other side, pitch car was invented because people used to play the games where you flick the quarters across the table. So,
Yeah, so
but still, to get into pitch car, you got to buy. I think it's like $80 to $100 for just a base set. It's
yeah,
not cheap.
but you're also looking at the fact that the tracks are made out of wood. The actual
Yeah.
cars themselves are little wooden discs that are really well made.
Yep.
With a little screen printing art on it. Other than that, but
Yeah.
I
would
have
give
to
it
say-
components. Like hands down, components are better. But art, I mean, the artists in there are world renowned now. Like, there's artists who have
I'm
made
not
their
gonna
living.
deny. I honestly think Magic the Gathering should move on. As much as I like Pitch Car, it's got its limitations.
Yep.
In all honesty, Pitch Car you want to play in a group. Magic the Gathering, you kind of just want to play one-on-one. Maybe a little bit. What is it, Commander, where you're.
Yeah, I'm still not a fan of Commander personally.
But you can. But I'm just saying.
Yeah, but a lot of
Magic
people
is
do
more
like
of a one-on-one thing. So if I have a Magic deck and you have a Magic deck, we can literally just bring out the decks and start playing.
Right.
Whereas if we want to play pitch card, we got to set up the track. We got to figure out which track we want. Then we got to start flicking, and hopefully nothing falls under the fridge.
It falls under the fridge. I hate it when that happens. It's one of the few games where you have to take that in consideration. I feel, on a similar idea, I feel so bad. My son has been wanting to play Dungeon Drop, and we don't have the table space right now because we're cleaning. And he's been begging me to play it lately, and I'm like, I can't. Until I build a little border, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was great.
No, I get it. So, but for me, honestly, I think Magic the Gathering should move on.
Magic moves on. So that's our miscellaneous category. Magic is the winner, meaning that Magic and Catan will be facing each other in the semifinals.
Oh man, that's gonna be a big one.
That'll be intense.
Every argument we could have for Magic the Gathering, we could have for Catan.
Yep. Well, I can think of a few, but we'll see when it gets
But
down
I'm
there.
just saying, like when it comes to their longevity and what they've done for the gaming
Right.
hobby.
Right, exactly. So now our next round, which will be my pick for the first argument, will be the Battle of the Knizia games, Raw versus Lost Cities.
So we found it interesting with this when we made these brackets that they literally all had themes. So El Grande versus Catan. We had the Spiel winner bracket.
Yep.
We had Raw versus Lost City, the Knizia bracket. Magic the Gathering versus Pitch Card, the Miscellaneous bracket.
Yeah. We'll see,
And,
right?
well, your pick is Lost Cities because it flew out of the hat.
All right, sounds good. Lost Cities out of the hat. Let's talk about it. Lost Cities is the quintessential two-player game. That's what started Cosmos's two-player line. I mean, I don't know if it was the first game in the line, but it was definitely one of the most popular, and it's still being printed to today. So keep that in mind. Like many of these games, some of them fade out of printing from time to time. Lost Cities never has. It's been continuously printed since the 90s when it came out. The idea of it is you're going on 5 expeditions. You are playing cards numbered from 2 to 10, or some handshake cards, which are multipliers. You and the player across the table from you are trying to basically play kind of like gin rummy in a way, where you where you play a card, draw a card. Very simple mechanism, but you're trying to play the cards in ascending order. Meaning, if I play a 2, I can only play a 3 or higher. I can no longer play handshakes. Where if I play a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At the end of the game, or the round, if you're playing multiple rounds, you count up the numbers on the cards, add them together, minus 20 because you went on that expedition, and multiply it either by 2, 3, or 4, depending on if you have 1, 2, or 3 handshakes. That is your score for that expedition. You do that over the 5 expeditions. Whoever has the highest score between the two wins. Now, what I like about this and why it works so well is when you have a two-player game, you want direct interaction, which is one thing that this has a lot of things going for it. If you do not pay attention to the player across the table from you and what they're doing, you will lose. That's a guarantee. Because knowing when to discard a card that would prevent them from benefiting, or knowing when to play your cards to not lead them on that you might be going for it, so they'll discard hopefully something valuable. Like, let's say if I'm going for the blue expedition, if Daniel has the 10 blue, and I start building on my blue expedition, he's holding on to that thing until the end of the game. I am not going to get it. And that whole timing and the give and take of that is what makes this so good. This has so much great interaction and just like that little subtle, okay, do I have enough where I want to go for the points, or do I want to, I'm going to multiply it, so do I want to go for one more card in this line? Maybe I can get some more points, or out some more victory, I don't know. But now's the time I'm going to start dumping cards. I love that part of it. So Lost Cities, I think, should move on.
So I have some issues with Lost Cities. Mind you, I have issues with Raw too. I'm not a Knizia fan. We've established this. I've liked one game so far. My thing is, this can bog itself down when people are trying to math the cards. When they're trying to think, okay, there's that much deck, there's this going on. That's a bit of an issue for me.
Okay.
Personally, and this is just a personal con, it's uninteresting. It's numbers. You're basically just putting numbers in a row.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
And the thing that I put here for it, and this is a big one, is it doesn't lend itself to replayability in the sense that way we argue replayability when it comes to arguments and stuff. So, like, if we played one game of Lost Cities, you played them all. All that's different is the shuffle of the deck.
Right.
So, in a sense, when it comes to replayability, that's my argument for it. But those are not that big arguments. One's personal, one's based on our criteria, and the only issue I have with it is people trying to map the deck. It's like when you're playing blackjack and someone's trying to find the manipulation, but at least I'm not playing against that player. I'm playing against the dealer.
Yeah. Now, I will say, as far as replay value, though, Lost Cities does have an expansion.
Sure.
It does. There is a 6th expedition that you can get. Does it change the game?
Say so.
Nope. No, it has a 6th expedition as an expansion.
That's what I said. If you say so. Like I said, I'm not really interested in playing this one.
Yeah.
Well, mind you, Raw is a whole different thing, and I'll even tell you one of my cons for it. No matter which version of this game you own, it's ugly as sin.
Yeah.
But other than that, Raw is actually a pretty decent push your luck game. You're drawing bags out. You're trying to make sure you're taking the right. I don't even know what they're called. Like themes or something like that. It's like, do I want these fish? Do I want this ground? Do I want to make sure nothing bad happens? What happens if I pull that raw token? Uh-oh, I'm screwed, kind of thing. And so I love push your lucks, and this is pretty decent. I really did enjoy it. I think we mentioned it in our honorable mentions. I think Can't Stop is a much better game than this.
Sure.
But I understand why people like it.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I also enjoy the Egyptian theme. For when it comes to Knizia, it's like you're in Lost Cities, you're doing an expedition. No, you're not. You're playing numbers. Yeah. This one has an Egyptian theme on it. No, you're not. You're pulling tiles out of a bag. So thematic, what?
Yeah, not really.
Other than that, it's out of these two games, I'd probably play Raw more just because it can hold more people. There might be a better interaction. Both these games I played 2 players.
Okay.
Lost Cities. Actually played the 4-player board game at 2 players.
At 2 players, which is silly, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is a tough one for me. If I'm going by like our criteria, I would say ease of play.
Ease of play goes to Raw.
I would say Raw, just because, as I mentioned, Lost Cities, the mathing problem, that can lead to some analysis paralysis or slow down of the game because someone's trying to math everything. And Push Your Luck, I think, has a lot easier than getting to the table rather than playing cards.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really is, like, your choice on your turn is draw a tile and add it, or invoke Raw.
Yeah.
Made that tile invoke Raw? It might.
Replay value, I think the length of time and scaling well, there's a hard argument for this. They both play pretty quickly. Yeah. I just think I slightly give this to Raw just for the simple fact that it can scale up to 4 people, and it doesn't really change the difference from everything I've read on it. Because it again, you said you...
Well, I think it plays up to 6, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking at my game right now, but I don't see... It doesn't say it on the side that's facing me. I think it plays up to 6.
So here's the big thing about it. You've already mentioned the expandability. So Lost Cities has an expansion, Raw doesn't. So it's 1-1. So here's the thing. Minimum number of plays to get the full experience of the game.
Yeah, that would be Raw.
That would be Raw because Lost Cities, you play the first game, it's the same deck every time. Only thing different is the shuffle. Yep. Whereas Raw, you can have different strategies each time you play depending on the tiles that you're pulling.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I agree with you on that. Replay value would go to Raw, but it does have an expansion for Lost Cities. Technically.
So here comes the big one. Meaningful choice. Lost Cities.
Lost Cities, yes. Hands down. Yep.
Because
everything you do
impacts. If you go through our subcategories that we've talked about before, impacting other players' strategies, do I hold this card or do I discard this card? How is it going to benefit my opponent? Yep. That's an impact on someone else's strategy. Yeah. Impacting your long-term strategy? Oh, yeah, if you put the wrong card out there, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. Yeah. Whereas with Raw, you're just pulling tiles out, so you really don't have a choice in that matter. It's just what comes up. Your only choice is to keep going or stop. And arbitrary choices make an impact of the game. Going again to the Push Your Luck. It's blind the whole way through. You actually have to make smart choices in Lost Cities.
That also leads to the other part of Raw, because Raw is 2 very different things. There's the Push Your Luck, and then there's the auction. And the brilliance that Reiner Knizia did with the 13 tiles for the auction, and you only have a 1-round auction, and you can only bid whatever tiles you have, and then how that changes to the next player who gets it, that's brilliant. I think that's very legitimately strong choice and valuable choice.
Yeah, that's it's one part as a meaningful choice right there.
Right.
But you're still beholden to what you draw out of the bag.
Right.
So that's basically, do I push or go on? Whereas Lost Cities, you have to be smart. Do I top deck this? Do I start to try to run this deck out? Right. Cause the end game scenario where we can get our scenarios, especially since I'm looking at him over here. He started the scenario and he's at negative 18 points. Yeah. Do I want to kind of force that? And so, yeah, I think at that point, Lost Cities leads you to more less arbitrary choices in that matter.
Yep. Okay, that's fair. I do agree with you. I do agree.
Art and production, hands down, goes to Lost Cities.
Yeah.
Raw has some decent artwork, but man, that game is ugly as sin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and the production is beautiful. Like I love the embossed board of the newer one. The raw tile, the bag is nice. Yeah, it's just so uncolorblind friendly it hurts.
Oh yeah, and everything's brown. What is with all the brown in Euro games? I don't get it. You guys live in a very lush area. Why is everything brown?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they just wanted to look realistic, I guess.
We live in the desert and there's more color than some of these board games.
I mean, but then also, when I think Egyptian, I don't think cartoon colors. Like, everything's old,
Oh no, but even then, Egyptian
destroyed.
is not that. It's very vibrant. Yeah, you have your dirt and stuff like that, but you still have the Nile, you still have the greenery.
Yeah.
Egyptians were very big on wheat farming. Don't argue history with me there, buddy.
No, but I mean, like, if you look at what you see as something that is Egyptian, you see the papyrus, you see, like, the pigments that they were able to use at the time. It all has a brown wash to it. Like, I mean, I don't disagree with, like, the geography of now, or even then. Sure,
Well,
yeah, it's green, but
yeah, it's because it's age. But no, it's just ugly as sin. I'm sorry.
yeah,
You can get that antique feel without being brown. Just look at Cleopatra.
yeah, okay, all right. I mean, I think that's a more realistic look, but I don't disagree with you. All right, but so what does that boil it down to? Like, I was following
Game
you.
immersion, honestly.
Game immersion. I mean, neither of them. No themes match the mechanisms. Technically,
really.
Lost Cities matches it slightly more because you're going on an expedition, and the minus 20 points is the cost.
I'm gonna call that a wash in all honesty.
I'm just saying, like, it makes more sense than like auctioning and push your luck for anything Egyptian. Like that doesn't. They don't even try and describe that.
I don't disagree, but honestly, they don't really match. You're playing cards versus pulling things out of the bag.
Player interaction, I would actually give that to Raw.
I think so too, just because I see what you're doing there. If you're going to bid that, I don't want to outbid you because then I get that piece in the next round or something like that.
Well, I just love the idea of like you're looking at there, you have the bag, you're ready to go, and you look over seeing like the flood tile that I know you need, and I grab the Raw, and I invoke it, and I slam it right down in front of me. I'm like, let's go. I love that. That really brings out a fun enjoyment from that. So
honestly, though, I think the memorable moments comes out of Lost Cities because you're like, oh, I see you're going on that yellow expedition. Sorry that I'm putting this 2 out there after you already put a 4.
Yeah, but then I would give memorable moments to Raw also because and hear me out on this. When one person is remaining in the round, they're allowed to continue going, but if they get the last Raw tile, then they don't get a win that last round, which can be absolutely amazing watching a group go, all right, am I gonna invoke Raw? Oh no, that's a stand-up moment. It really is. Whereas Lost Cities, I can't imagine the situation where I would stand up. I love Lost Cities.
I get what you're trying to say, but Lost Cities, because it's a 2-player game, it still leads itself to a memorable moment.
Yeah.
Imagine playing with this with your spouse, and you throw a card after they already started it, and they get pissed off at you because you did that. That's going to lead to memorable moments. You're like, hey, remember the last time we played this game, and I threw a 2 down when you started that expedition already? Yeah, you remember that? Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. I agree with you. But for a 2-player game, this allows for memorable moments at a more intimate level.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then that means Lost Cities moves on, doesn't it?
Yep.
All right. Very interesting. So Lost Cities will be in our 3rd seed for the semifinals.
Well, it's going to face either
the winner of Acquire or For Sale.
All right. It's going to be the underdog in that one.
Well, I have some good counter arguments for each of these. So now this is your argument, Daniel. And this will be between Acquire, made by Sid Saxon in the mid-60s, let me point out, versus For Sale by Stefan Dora, I believe, and made in 1990-something. You have acquire?
I
All
have
right.
acquire.
Go ahead and argue it.
Oh boy. So, I mean, it's a classic for a reason. It's actually a pretty good game for something that came out of the 60s. I'm just not a fan of it myself.
Okay.
It's a really decent economics game for being as old as it is, because what you're doing is you're just trying to kind of merge stocks in
Yeah.
the right way. So you want to start one way, and you're trying to force the stocks to bleed into you. This way, you can start buying that stock, and whoever has the most at the end of the game wins. And so you're trying to be, okay, do I want to put it on here on this grid or here on this grid, depending on what gets drawn up, and how do I want to manipulate the big stock, whatever it will be, because once like two or three or one merges, it becomes the powerful stock. So you want
Yeah.
yours to be the higher level stock once it merges into something, because it becomes more powerful. And then you're going to try to merge someone else, but everybody else is trying to stop that merger from you happening. So they're trying to make sure these other two stocks combine together to make it bigger, and because they have stock in that. And so there's lends to itself to a lot of interesting choices.
Right.
And I enjoy it for what it is. And plus, it's Saxon. I mentioned Can't Stop is actually one of my favorite games, especially when it comes to Push Your Luck. If not my favorite Push Your Luck game that we've played so far. Actually, I think Quacks has really replaced it for that. But
Yeah.
for this one to be as phenomenal as it is, says something, especially since the 60s, and people were still playing it to this day. And it's still highly rated on Board Game Geek.
Yep.
To the point where, again, we went through the all-game rankings, and it was our fourth game that we found. So it was in the high hundreds.
And that's not to point out that this is the only game that is not in the 90s in our list. This is the only one, and not even just, oh, it's just late 80s. No, 1965, I believe.
Yeah. In fact, it was part of the that book series of games, correct?
Yeah, the 3M bookshelf games.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, this was one of their flagship titles. And at the time, I mean, so Avalon Hill, they were the competitors to 3M. I'm going to give a quick history lesson. But Avalon Hill didn't come onto the scene till like the late 60s, where 3M, they made a line of bookshelf games. If you've heard of any of the, not Command and Conquer series, the war game series that Avalon Hill was making, those were directly inspired because of that. And so Avalon Hill, they started being a direct competitor to 3M, seeing what they were doing and making all these games, war games, countless others, and they ended up buying the rights to all of the games that 3M was making, and Avalon Hill now owns Acquire and prints it from time to time in better quality versions too. I have a newer version somewhere on my shelf.
Yeah, and what I have to say about Acquire, for the 60s, it actually came with some pretty decent components for its time.
Yeah, it was like Scrabble tiles, and it was a plastic board that was indented. The only thing that you could say against it is that it's just a grid of letters and numbers.
It's and that's one of my cons. It's old, but oof, is it not pretty?
Yeah, it's even ugly for the 60s, which is saying something.
Well, but then again, it's basically a stock game. Even then, you're not really gonna get a very pretty stock game. Even Exchange, what we were talking about in the past podcast.
Yeah.
It's not even that pretty. It's got some nice artwork and stuff like that, but there's not a lot going on because it's a stock game.
Yeah.
Stockpile is probably one of the prettiest stock economic games, and even then, it's meh.
Yeah. And what makes Acquire interesting is at first you're thinking, oh, well, I'm just putting down tiles and maybe buying stock. No, imagine what you would do with the stock market if you had 6 separate pieces in the future of insider information. Think about that for a minute, because that's really what your tiles are. You know what's going to get placed down, what's going to merge into what stocks, and how they're going to grow. And so you'll want to buy them small to the point where you want to be acquiring other companies and then buying up those stocks. So, which is also a good thing when that happens, because then you can trade 2 to 1, but then at the end of the game, whoever has the most, they're the winner. So it has this cool monopolization idea, using effectively a Scrabble board. So, which doesn't make any sense, but it works. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. It's a good game for what it is, but you're arguing my point for me, so thank you. So why don't you go ahead and
No,
argue for sale now?
I know you were because it's been a long time since you've played it, and
Yeah.
I and the truth is I do struggle to get it to the table. It's hard to convince people to play it. It really
Yeah.
is. Whereas,
I have some cons for it that I wrote, so that I'm keeping just in case it does move on.
okay, sounds good. So let's talk about For Sale, the game that plays definitively in two separate phases, which I've heard they just recently made an expansion for it, which
Oh,
adds a
okay.
third phase to the game,
It's
which
quite
I don't know
interesting.
about
I
that.
heard about that expansion. You can buy that, but it's because they made a re-theme of it about
Yeah,
like cars or something like that,
yeah,
and they added the expansion for that. And they're like, "Oh wait, but maybe we should put this in the for sale." And I'm like, "No, don't touch for sale.
yeah.
Leave it alone."
It's beautiful the way it is. It doesn't need it. No, it's a very simple game. The first round, you just have a series of houses that are numbered from 1 to 30, and you have some coins that you're going to be auctioning off. You have to bid at least as many as the other players, and anybody who passes throughout the round of auctioning, they are only going to have to pay half of the money that they bid, rounded down, and then they have, or maybe rounded up, I always forget, but rounded, and then they take the lowest value when they pass. So if a game where you're auctioning off, let's say, number 30, 20, and 10, that's very different than if it's, 11, 10, and 12. Very different. The money is going to fluctuate extreme. Then, once you've gone through the whole round of that, then you're going to be playing these check cards. And these checks are valued anywhere between 0 and $15,000. And you all play cards simultaneously from the houses that you won in the previous round. Flip them over. Whoever has the highest value gets the highest value check, and so on down the line. You just do that, those 2 rounds. Whoever has the most money from their checks and the money they had from the first round wins. Brilliant, incredibly elegant game.
Oh yeah.
Great planning.
Honestly, I believe this is a game that everybody should have in their collection.
Yes.
I personally don't yet.
Yet.
Keyword being yet.
As soon as you find it for sale, you're going to buy it. I already know you are.
I love this game. I think it's a phenomenal game. In fact, you saw I groaned when I got acquired because I truly love For Sale.
Yeah.
For an auction bidding game, which I am not a huge fan of.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of auction bidding games. This is a phenomenal game. It plays so quick. 10, 15 minutes if you are around a bunch of players who already know what they're doing and how they're going to do it. And like you mentioned earlier, when you're talking about like they have to take the lowest setting house. If 3 high-priced houses come up, that's when you see a lot of people going, "I'm fine with whatever I get here. These are high-priced houses, so
yeah, exactly.
I'll bid a coin and I'll pay that 1 coin."
Yeah. Why not? Right? It's just a coin. Whatever. Even if you win, you pay a coin. It's worth it. Yeah. No. There's something so satisfying about this game.
But my cons for this is that it might be a little too light for some people. It is that light of a game. You're bidding some money, you're buying some houses, then you're using those houses to selling those houses basically to get a nice equity and get money back. And so whoever has the most at the end of the game wins.
The only other con that I have, and this is just a minor gripe, the quality on the cards, the finish that they put on it, you can't. It's awful. It's really, really awful. The cards don't feel good, and they don't slide against each other. It's cringy to deal with. They don't shuffle very well. The tokens are okay. I mean, it's just 2 decks of cards and some tokens, so whatever.
Yeah.
But
it's a game. I talked about it before. I have a photo thing that I carry my card games in. I could put in one of those and take it anywhere, and I still have a good time playing it with anybody.
Yeah.
It's very easily portable, and that's sometimes a good thing, especially if I'm on a plane ride with the wife and we just want to play a little card game. That's very good for this as well. Another con that I have for sale though is, as I mentioned with Lost Cities, the way we argue replay value, it doesn't really afford itself for replay value in that sense. I mean, it does have that one expansion that just came out.
Yeah,
after what, 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
So it does have that, but again, same with Lost Cities. It's just the shuffle of the cards. That's the only variation you're going to get in the game.
Yeah, exactly. No, honestly, so I know I've played legitimately or substantially more Reiner Knizia games than you have, and that's not a knock on you. But this honestly feels like it should have been a Knizia game. I give Stefan Dora a lot of credit. This feels like
Yeah,
something Knizia would have made.
doesn't really match his theme like it should, but
Nope.
honestly, if this was a Knizia game, this would be the most thematic Knizia game because you're basically auctioning and trying to buy a house and flipping them for money later on.
Yeah.
So it does feel like a housing market type of game.
Yeah.
This would be that's why I don't feel like it's a Knizia game because there's theme in it. Not great, but there's theme.
Yeah, it's technically. Although I feel like Acquire is more thematic than this.
Yes, but you're also talking about like having fun and bidding or playing a hour-long game of stocks and looking at a Scrabble grid.
Yeah. I mean, well, if you take like real world stock into account, you're staring at just a bunch of numbers fluctuating on a board.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not. It's not exact. The source material is not the most aesthetic either.
no, it's not honestly. And yeah, for this one, I know what my vote is. I'm pretty sure what your vote is. I just think we have to make sure we go through it properly.
Yeah. My personal one would be Acquire. I think Acquire moves on.
Yeah, so I think we're both split on that. So I'm just gonna go through the rundown real quick of the criteria. Ease of play, hands down for sale.
For sale. Yep.
Replay value,
Acquire.
acquire.
Yep.
Meaningful choices,
Acquire.
Game immersion. Now I will say this, and I will fight for sale to the death. I think for sale leads itself to more memorable moments, other than the theme matching the mechanism.
Oh yeah, yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's as far as immersion, it really does feel like you're trading stock that's fluctuating and you're able to get that feel of it. But the memorable moments part of it is definitely for sale.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
And the player interaction, because a lot of times, the couple times I played Acquire, I think it was one or two times. I know I've played it twice at the shop, so that's what I'm assuming is twice. Yeah. Is
yeah,
that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
there's not a lot of talk going on, but it's like, what are you gonna bid? What are you gonna bid? Am I gonna do a coin or am I gonna do a lot? Do I really want this house or do I not? It takes a lot of like taunting and talking and getting mad at each other when that third person or fourth person outbids you and you like, you son of a.
not again. Yeah, yeah, I can agree with that. Cool.
So I just think game immersion, but art and production. And here comes the fun one. We're arguing something that was made in the 90s that has some decent artwork versus something that was made in the 60s and ugly as sin.
Yeah.
So of course the art's going to go to for sale.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
But the pieces and components, however,
that is Acquire.
Acquire.
Yep. And then as far as the graphic design, Acquire does make sense. I mean, not saying that for sale doesn't, because it doesn't need anything more than just numbers and check cards. But I mean, it would be a wash at best.
Yeah.
So with that being said, Acquire moves on.
Acquire is moving on against Lost Cities.
Wow, I never thought I would argue those two together.
Yeah, it's kind of weird here, so let me go ahead and mark that out. So, to go on with how we always do this, we like to tell you how the fan vote went for the eliminated games. So our number one seed, El Grande, which was eliminated by Catan, the low seed, actually was in fourth place on our fan vote at 4. Then we're moving along to the 7 seed Pitch Car, which got eliminated by Magic the Gathering. Pitch Car was sad boy. He had 0 votes.
No love for Pitch Car.
Nope, not at all. Next up, our 3 seed Raw ended up getting eliminated by Lost Cities, and that was down there too. It only had 1 singular vote.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure that came from you under an alt account.
Oh man, I can't wait to show you Raw in a big group. It really does. I think you're going to be surprised at how different it is.
And finally, of course, For Sale, just eliminated by Acquire. And I'm glad we decided to push Acquire through by a slim margin because they were tied
Wow.
for 5th place. Both had 3 votes apiece.
Wow. Well done. All right. So that brings us into the semifinals.
Yep, and that would be Catan, our 8 seed with the upset over El Grande, facing the 2 seed Magic. Can it keep its Magic run going?
Uh, but let's keep going. So this is going to be my argument.
Uh, uh yes, because I got acquired.
Okay. That's right, because you cringed a little when you got acquired.
Yeah, just it's an ugly game. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. I mean, I can make a strong case for either of these, so
All
I'm
right,
ready
your
to try.
pick is Catan.
Catan. All right, let's go. As an avid player of both of these games for a good chunk of my life, Catan is the better game. So, let's talk about why. Sure, it is an economic game, technically. It takes all of the joy that kids had theoretically from playing Monopoly and that trading and the back and forth between players. That was really the part of why people still play Monopoly. They don't play it to move a pawn in a board in a circular motion for
Yeah,
days.
they play it to be rude to their family
They
members.
play it to be that. So the fact that you are doing these active trades in Catan is what makes a stale Euro game appeal to an Americanized audience, is because we grew up arguing with conflict and having these backstabbery deals and shady dealings. That's why Catan worked so well, because at its core it is a solid Euro game. Each resource is valuable in its own circumstance. You are building up to the first to 10 points. You are having area control. You have a cool economic simulation because of how the dice roll. It's not a guarantee, but that's what you hedge your bets on. And the first to 10 points wins. And you don't win just by chance. You win by who plays their resources the best. Now, Catan is going up against Magic, which also does have a very special place in my heart. But there is a reason there are so many offshoot games of Magic, and you and I know that. And it's because a lot of those offshoot games that we said earlier were from Magic players who said, okay, this is broken. If I were to change something, this is what I would change. And then they make their own variations on it. Who has the first turn advantage?
Richard Garfield did that same thing
Richard
with
Garfield.
Keyforge.
Yeah. And then also, sure, Catan has a very competitive upbringing. There are world championships, and rightfully so. But
I mean, there's Monopoly Championships too,
yeah.
so don't bring that up.
Yeah, well, but what I'm saying, though, is that the community that it's built upon is a very friendly, enjoyable community. Not saying that Magic isn't, but there is, it lends itself to. I read an article about Magic, and there was a guy who got removed from the championships because they believed he was cheating because of the way the card sleeves were bent around the corners, which looked like normal wear and tear. Certain cards had more wear than others, and therefore they were like, oh, well, he was probably noting that on purpose. If it gets to that point, it's ridiculous,
No,
Like,
I agree, yeah.
it's the same thing that, like, oh, well, you can no longer throw celebrations in the end zone because it's bad sportsmanship. It's like, but, I mean, I get it. It was taking away from the game itself.
Well, don't even bring up football and me in that whole thing, because that's why the NFL stands for the No Fun League.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like it's gotten to the point where it is no fun, And Magic, for all of the strategy and all of the capabilities that it's had, it's still beholden to the chance of the cards and how you draw. It's still beholden to if I have more money, I'm probably going to be the winner. And it just none of those caveats apply to Catan, because it really is who can wheel and deal the best.
Well, yes and no. I have some cons for Catan here that I'm going to go ahead and tell you about.
Sure.
The robber can really hurt someone in the very beginning of the game.
Yeah, it can.
If it gets moved to a certain area and doesn't get removed because of the re-rolls and stuff like that, it literally could take someone out of the game in the very beginning. And that's a big thing. That's why people don't like Catan, because of that robber.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it can hurt people as well as the trading. Yeah, it's great, and you want to be that way. But trading can be one-sided if a player decides that, oh, if it doesn't benefit me, then why do I got to worry about it? I'll eventually get what I need out of it. So that's another thing that could take people out of it. Yeah, you're trading, and that's kind of thematic when someone's like that, but it's going to
Yeah.
take you out of the game because you're playing board games to have fun.
Yep.
And so those are my big cons with Catan. Is the robber
Yep.
is I understand what its purpose is for, but
Sure.
especially in the early game, it can hurt someone before to the point where after like 2 or 3 rounds, they can't get any of the resources. When something rolls, they're hurt. They're
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah, that's fair.
And the trading thing, it's just like, but then again, don't play with jerks like that. That's the biggest mitigation of it. If they're going to be like that, then don't play with it. Sorry, Mom, I'm not playing with you if you're going to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, and we were talking about a completely different game, but this is just a comparison. Uh, it was a game where he was the judge for a lot of the competitions that we would have at the shop, and he said that he would just get so frustrated when somebody was like, Judge, he was supposed to put a token down, and he didn't. Therefore, he concedes. It's like, what? Did you know he was supposed to place a token? Yeah. Did he eventually place the token? Yeah. Then what's the problem? It's like stop being that guy, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. So yeah,
But I
it's
mean,
just,
Magic the Gathering lends itself to that same exact problem. Not really the robber, but
yeah.
one side of the player just being, as you just
Oh yeah.
mentioned, when they have that magic.
He forgot to untap his land at the beginning of his turn, which is the very first thing you do, and therefore he mana burned and took all the damage and lost. Oh wow, you're I bet you're a great person to live with. Like,
Yeah. So yeah, I have
ugh.
some issues with Magic the Gathering. As much as I prefer playing it, it's just not my favorite thing in the world. There's other card games that I prefer,
Yeah.
but that's just a personal choice. I think Magic the Gathering, where it shines, is when you're playing with friends. It's just you're playing a very good game with friends. You like to play what do you call it? Magic poker or something like that?
Pack poker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a whole box of booster packs just for that very reason. The idea is very simple. Nobody constructs a deck. You each get a booster pack. You shuffle in 2 of each color land, and then you, after looking through the pack, you choose 1 more basic land. Shuffle it together, play it head to head. That's it.
And so I think that's a phenomenal idea, in all honesty, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's a good 2-player game. It's
Mhm.
so especially in this time frame where we're in right now,
Yeah.
it's good because if you have a deck and I have a deck, we literally could just play Magic the Gathering over Zoom and just show each other the cards, whether we have a top-down camera or whatnot.
Yep.
It's something that you can play in front of people.
Yeah.
Zoom, there's a little more leeway than say something like Just One, where you just got to put up a paper.
Yeah.
But honestly, it lends itself to that. And when we come to expandability, yeah, Catan's got a lot of expansions,
But Magic is the expansion. It is the ever-growing expanse. It is no.
Didn't they just release a new big pack just recently?
Oh, they. I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
The-
that was a
I
whole
don't
thing
think.
that was coming out.
I think the longest time frame you go between a Magic release is a month and a half, if I'm not
Something like that.
mistaken. So like, and that's a
Well,
brand new set.
Yeah, it's ever expanding. Everything's coming out, and what I like about it is that if you're going to play it competitively, there's an ebb and flow. Okay, we've noticed these cards are very overpowerful, so they're now banned. But we have these new cards that are coming in this new deck, and it's good money way to make money too. It's like
Yeah.
that kind of do what that does, but not as overpowered as that. So you have to
Right.
either spend more, or you got to do this. They're always ever changing and trying to make it as balanced as possible. And
Yes.
I like the fact that it's basically a fluid game. And I think that's neat. I think that's really neat.
It is.
Whereas Catan, like I said, the robber is something, a mitigating factor. Magic is actually trying to support it. But if you're
Yeah.
not into the competitive field, which is a con for Magic the Gathering for me personally, my wife enjoyed this game. She really enjoyed it. But the community itself is what kept
Mhm.
her out of it.
It-
And
And
it's not a
also,
knock to Magic.
yeah, it's not a nod, but one of the things is like, because of the fact that it's ever expanding that you brought up, it makes it interesting, but it makes every once in a while when somebody goes, oh, whoops, didn't think of that, you get game breaking problems, and
Yeah.
and which I mean I'm sure there's some problems with some expansions as far as Catan goes, but nothing where somebody can win first turn. I'm going to give an example. There was one of the win conditions in Magic is if you draw your last card and you run out of cards in your deck, you lose, right? And so there was a card that I remember playing with, and I was the first one in town like 15 years ago to play against this. It was called the World Gorger Dragon. And basically, bless you, when it comes into play, every other permanent gets removed from play or it gets exiled. Okay, makes
Oh
sense.
man.
Yeah, it's kind of it's big, but it also costs a lot. But here's the thing: you can play a card called Exhume, which is an enchant creature and it enchants the creature and brings it into play. Well, so what happens was Exhume would come in, World Gorger Dragon gets enchanted by it, every other permanent gets removed, including the enchant creature. Well, now World Gorger Dragon is no longer enchanted, so it's removed from play, it's discarded. But because of that, everything comes back in. So then it enchants it again, does that, comes back continuously. The problem with this is that every time something comes back into play, it comes in untapped. So you tap your land, do it again. Tap your land, you have an infinite now amount of mana. Then you play a card where target player draws X number of cards. You draw your deck, you lost first turn. I played against that as a teenager. That's never going to happen in Catan. You're never going to roll the robber and then lose definitively. It's just never going to happen.
No, I get it. I don't disagree with you. And honestly, I think Catan should move on as well. I just think when we're arguing the point here, Magic the Gathering, there's a reason why it's still as big as it is. Catan is nowhere near as big as Magic the Gathering is.
No.
It has a
unreasonable
community,
to say
but
so.
Magic the Gathering is keeping shops in business.
Yeah.
Catan is not.
That's true. So then you know what? I think it's closer than we think. Let's break down the list real quick. Ease of play. I think that goes to Catan.
Yeah, I could see that. Magic's pretty easy. You draw a card, you play a card. So that's just
yeah, but because of all of the
there's
rules,
other things on it. Yeah, no, I don't say, but I'm just saying Magic is simple. It's just there's also other things to it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on to it. Art
However,
and production.
I think Magic has a better chance of getting to the table.
Yeah, yeah, I would say they're pretty similar as far as depending.
Honestly,
but then
hey,
you also have
we're these spellcasters fighting each other. All we're doing is playing some cards and stuff like that.
Right.
Versus, hey, you gotta bust this out, set it up. So I think honestly, likelihood to get to the table is Magic, especially here.
I'm going to give two counter arguments to that because I don't necessarily agree. One, and we brought this up before, is that, there are people who for whatever regions personally will not allow Magic, for one. But that's a small subsect of people. But also on the thing is, Magic is notorious for being kind of complicated, and that is off-putting to a lot of people, where Catan, it's like, oh, it's just a family board game. It's like Monopoly. Come join. And then non-gamers, I feel, are more inclined. I'd be okay calling it a wash.
All right, I'll give you a wash because I'm just thinking there's some people who've heard horror stories about Catan and won't play it, just like they won't play Monopoly.
Yeah. Okay, agreed.
However,
AP prone.
wash.
That's Magic, hands down.
I know.
Because Catan, it's like, oh, roll, get some resources. Can I build something right now? No. Anybody want to trade? No. Okay, your turn. That's it. Where it's like, oh, but if I bring out this guy, but if I attack with him first, force him to possibly block, but if he doesn't, then I might, already it is AP.
No, I don't disagree. I'm just like...
Which is why I don't play Commander. I hate it. 2 AP. People, I played Commander for 2 hours once with a group of friends, 4 people, and everybody was being so nice to each other, going, oh, I'll attack you for 1, and I'll attack you for 1. And then I was like, you know what, this is dumb. I'm going to target somebody. I know I'm going to lose now, but at least I'm going to get this game rolling. Like, I'm going to paint a target on my back. I'm going to swing at you for 15. Go for it. I was just tired of that.
No, I don't get you. That's when it comes down to the replay value, too, is length of time and scaling well. That goes to Catan, honestly.
Yeah.
Because every turn is simply fast.
Yep.
Whereas if you're playing Commander, as you were saying, and you got people who are being Care Bears, it's just not going to work.
And then player range and scale also goes to Catan because it doesn't add much more time to play with multiple players. There is a
Oh
5
yeah,
and
that's
6
what I was
player
saying. Length of time
expansion.
is
Yeah,
scaling well.
yeah. Minimum
Minimum
number
number
of
of
players.
plays.
That's Magic, as well as additional content.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So replay value goes to Magic. Ease of play is Catan. Meaningful choices.
And this one where it's going to be tough to come out with. I want to say it's Catan, but I mean, when you're impacting other players' strategy, if you take out some of the creatures they have on the field by a magic card that you have,
Yeah.
or whatever the spell card is, what I think what they're
Yeah.
called, it could really impact their strategy because they're like, okay, I got my army set up here, and I'm going to start doing some attack. I'm going to destroy that monster, that monster. Oh, by the way, here's my spell card. It wipes out that creature, and that creature, and that creature. So
Yeah. And this is kind of a weird idea, but we have to compare for long-term strategy, your deck construction, that does matter. And I think
oh,
that's
it
a
really does.
factor that plays into it.
You have to make sure you have a minimum number, a lot of cards, but you can have as
Mm-hmm.
many cards as you want in your deck. Really, there's not a maximum that I've ever seen, but you don't want to have that too many cards. Yeah, you're
Yes.
going to have that ability where people are going to try to force you to draw decks, so you want to have a little shield from that.
Yeah.
But you want to also be able to get to your good creatures quicker.
Yeah. And then just having the right distribution. It's like if I have one land for every 3 cards, like that's a lot. Like
Yeah.
is that and that's the general standard. Now it's probably about 15, like 1 in 4 cards, but still
Yeah.
if you're playing something that's like expensive cards, you need that flood, but you have to prepare for. Yeah, there's impacting your long term strategy goes before the game starts. So
Yeah, so no, I don't disagree. Yeah, properly building that deck is a strategy. You have to make sure it's fit for what you're trying to do, and I think right there that goes to it. When it comes
hmm
to affecting other players' strategy, as I was mentioning earlier, I think that has to go to Magic as
yeah,
well.
agreed.
Just because Catan, you're also beholden to the dice roll too. So,
hmm
and the only time you really could affect other people's strategy is if you roll the robber and put it in an area, or you just decide not to trade with that specific person because you're seeing how far ahead they are.
Or well, the way you build your roads too,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's not as impactful as Magic is. So meaningful choice goes to Magic. Never thought
Magic.
I'd say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, neither
Um,
did I.
yeah. So replay value, meaningful choice. That's 2 points for Magic, and art and production. That's difficult because it's
Because
just
Magic,
cards.
as you mentioned earlier, Magic has made a lot of people money because of their artwork,
Yes.
made them well-known households. But that's just art. We're
Yeah.
talking about pieces and components where you have to buy like a top-down, a spiral-down thing, like looks like a die. I forget what they're called, counter,
Oh yeah.
and you have
Yeah.
to
You
buy
have to.
that. You don't necessarily. It doesn't necessarily come in the game. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. It just
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah. Any way
But
to keep track of life counts. But one thing I will say that why I think, um, personally, components also goes to Magic. First off, the iconography that already I think that goes to Catan personally because it's elegant the
yeah,
way they do it,
yeah.
and they have to have text explaining everything.
But that's the graphic
But
design part of it.
the
But if they lose
components, yeah, the components I feel do go to Magic, and that's because right now, and I guarantee it, if I went over here and grabbed a Magic deck from the early 2000s, 20 years ago that I've played, and I shuffled it, it would be just as good a quality as it was then. It they that card stock that they use is premium. That set the standard for card stock.
well,
Three
not just
hundred
that.
ten
Think
pound
about it
paper.
this way: when we're talking about cardstock, people go out of their way to find uncut sheets for they can put on
Yes.
their wall.
Yes. Yes. That tells you
That's
something about the components.
yeah,
I mean, but like if I were to tell you it's like, "Oh, I'm printing a game and it's using 310 pound card stock with black core." You'd be like, "Who's a what now? Like what'd you call
yeah,
me?" And if I told you it's Magic the Gathering quality, you'd be like, "Gotcha.
yeah.
That's
No,
good
exactly.
quality." Yeah,
In
it's
fact, if you notice, like some of the earlier Kickstarters, they're saying we're using cardstock equivalent to Magic the Gathering and some
yep.
of their stuff,
Yep.
and it's like they set a standard for cardstock.
They did. They really did. And that's I think worth noting. So that means art and
Magic,
production goes to Magic, which
Magic
puts
moves on.
Magic onto the semifinals. Ooh, didn't think that, huh?
No, I thought it was going to be Catan, but honestly, we're arguing two very historic games in two very different ways. One's
Yeah.
historic because of the TCGs, and as I mentioned earlier, it's what kept and is still keeping game stores alive.
Yeah.
They're predominantly Magic stores that sell board games because as much as we love the board gaming hobby,
Yeah.
this
You
can't
can't
be the
deny
only
that.
thing there. They have to do something like our personal one is a comic shop
Yep.
with board gaming.
Yep.
In Magic, so
right, and the fact that I believe Magic the Gathering went international before Catan because they came out in the same year.
Yeah.
One came from Germany, one came from the U.S. Of course, it's more immersive here, but I have Magic the Gathering cards written in Sanskrit. Like, need I say more?
Honestly, to be truthfully honest here, there's a reason why Magic was able to go before Catan. Catan had to translate an entire rule set, which Magic did, but most of their stuff is script anyway, so you just give it to a localizer, let them translate, and then boom, they're already out there. They already have the artwork and everything done.
Yeah.
It's not like with Pokemon that had like different artwork for the same thing for different regions. Like Japan's artwork is completely different than American artwork.
Yep. Yeah, which was a little...
Magic's like, already here's our template. This is what each and everything says. Localize it. Have at it. Whereas Catan was like, okay, we have to explain this down to the T, but make sure we get the rule set translated right.
That's fair. Cool. Well, this was an interesting debate. And now let's go to round 2 of our semifinals, which is Acquire and Lost Cities. And this will be your argument.
Mine? Yeah.
Yep. Neither of which you enjoy all that much, but...
Yeah, this is not a good bracket for me.
Yeah, it's okay, though.
What's funny is that the top 4 games that have pushed on so far, or the games that have pushed on so far, I'm not a huge fan of.
No.
I like some, but... Alright,
and that's why you're the newer gamer, you know, like the Cult of the New. This is all stuff I grew up with, so I'm invested.
I grew up with Monopoly and Risk and a little bit of Hero Quest that I never got to play.
I mean, don't get me wrong. If we had Bonanza in this list, I'd be pushing it hard.
So would I, because I really enjoy that one.
Yeah.
Like my 3 honorable mentions, I like more than most of these games on this list, except for maybe Pitch Car and For Sale No Grande. The 3 of the 8 games I really, really love and would push hard. But yeah.
Cool.
All right, so my pick is Lost Cities.
Okay. Go for it.
Either way, both of these games I'm going to have to trust on you. You know them a lot more than I do. But I do have to say that Lost Cities is an enjoyable 2-player game if you're playing with the right person. If I'm playing with someone I don't know, I don't think I'd have just as much fun as if I played with, say, my wife, or with you, or Dom, or Bryce, anybody in my gaming group. Just because I know how they play, I know what they're going to do, I know they won't take long turns. If someone is sitting there trying to math the cards in the opening hand, I'm just going to be sitting there like, just play your card already. Come on, let's move. And it does lend itself to a lot of meaningful choices. Do I discard this card, knowing that he's maybe trying to get better cards here, but I need to get better cards in my deck before I can start a run? So it does lend itself to how you want to play your cards and what you're going to do. The only luck really is in the initial shuffle, and then it's all meaningful choice the rest of the way.
Okay.
And it's got great artwork for its time. It really... okay for 99 for its artwork for a card game, no less. It's decent. It's got a decent graphic design. It's got good card stock. It's an okay game. Like I said, I played the board game as well, and I'd rather play this version than the board game ever again.
That's fair. Cool.
But that's really all I got for Lost Cities.
Okay. All right.
Like I said, I've only played this one once personally. I played the board game, but yeah, and then Acquire, I don't like stock market games, and that's like the ugliest one of them.
I know, you do like your pretty games. I understand that.
Cult of the New. I mean, just look at my shelves.
Yep. No, I mean, I'm clearly Cult of the New. I mean, I have a Magic the Gathering themed game right there. I have a game here from like the 80s and 90s, maybe 70s even. Anyway.
Oh man, I don't even know what my oldest game in my collection is. Ugh.
Ooh, now that's a topic we should talk about.
I guess Twilight Imperium, but I have the 4th edition, so...
That's a good chits and giggles. What's the oldest game in your collection? Both what you've had the longest and... Ooh. Write that down. We'll talk about that later. All right. So for Acquire, I mean, it is Beholden. It's a great strategy game. You're going to be laying down these tiles on the grid that represent different companies. The area the company is, or the size that it determines how large and how much financial standing it has in the system. Once two companies' tiles merge adjacently, then they become one company and one acquires the other one. Therefore, whoever owns stock in the one that is acquired can either sell it then or trade at a 2-to-1 rate, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but I would have to check.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, but you trade at a rate to the newer company, but then that means that company, the one that acquired the other one, is now that much more valuable. So, if I have a 9-tile building or a 9-tile company versus a 6-tile company, and I place that tile down, that is now 16 tiles that it is now, and that means that the stock is worth that much more for each stock that I've had in it. It's interesting. I like how it accelerates in that style, and it is kind of thematic. It's a very abstracted way to represent the stock market and the size of the companies, but it does make sense as far as the economics go. So personally, I think Acquire is just a better choice. Not to say that Lost Cities shouldn't go on. Um, so I'm gonna jump through it real quick. Ease of play goes to Lost Cities. Uh, Meaningful choice. I'm sorry, art and production goes to Lost Cities. I'll give it that.
Yeah.
But immersion, replay value, and meaningful choice all go to Acquire because replay value.
No. Lost Cities has an expansion.
Yeah, so additional content, right? It does, yeah. I'll give you that. But player range and scale, it's more than a 2-player game. And it does play about as long as Lost Cities, maybe about twice as long at most. It's not.
Well, not if you're playing a 4-player game of it.
Well, if you're playing a 4-player game of Acquire, it doesn't extend the game too much because the game goes only as long as those buildings
Oh,
are
it's
combined.
it's like watching paint dry. That's how long this game goes.
And it's not that long. It's like 45 minutes to an hour.
And so one of my cons for Acquire, real quick, I do have to mention,
Sure.
is that it can be overwhelming at
Yes.
times and one-sided. If you don't get the right placement at the beginning, you can get screwed if things at the very beginning, when you do your initial setup,
Mhm.
and they don't merge right, and then you're just left behind. You see all these other companies merging together, and you're over there in your little corner trying to get into that section. So
Sure, yeah. I mean that's beholden to the market, yeah. But you can still buy stock in other companies. So if you're
yeah,
seeing that, you're still like
yeah,
you.
no,
I get you. I get you. I mean, but
oh, I'm actually
also
pushing for a Knizia game to move through because that's how much I don't like Acquire.
when was the last time you played Acquire? It's got to be like 3 or 4 years at least, right?
It's been longer than that. It's the last time I played Acquire was right before you moved to Albuquerque.
Oh my God, so that's 6 years ago.
Yeah.
We need to refresh you on that.
No, I'm good.
Well, anyway,
Twice is enough.
replay value though it does. I mean, it's true with anybody with AP. Yes, I will give it that it's more AP prone. Yes, it acquires
Much
definitely
more
more
AP.
AP prone.
Yeah.
But as far as meaningful
There's
choices,
more AP prone in Acquire than Lost Cities, the board game, when you're playing with 4 players.
yeah, oh yeah, that's still yeah. Lost City's a
Let's
board
just put it
game, I
this way.
think.
The one mutual we always brought up with, I'd rather play Lost Cities,
Whatever it
the
is.
board game, and Lost Cities with them
Oh, yeah.
rather than Acquire.
Well, Lost Cities is only going to be like a 45-minute game, like at most. Like you have to play for a long time to make it not a 45-minute game. But the thing is, Acquire. So what I'm saying though is that the game ends when enough tiles are on the board, and regardless of how many players are playing, those tiles are still coming in every turn. Sure, you get fewer turns, but that doesn't extend the length of the game. Um, So, I mean, as far as scale, it's not that bad. And then minimum number of plays, like knowing how, like when to buy and sell, I think is more likely than
I will allow you to move Acquire through.
yeah.
Fine, you can get your Sid Saxon game in. I just think it's not that interesting of a game.
Right, which leads us to so we're gonna put on Acquire, but you and I both know kind of where this is leading, I think, and I think if
Oh, yeah.
anybody's listening to this, That's a good chance. But before we go into the finals, which will be Magic the Gathering versus Acquire, God, that's such a bizarre idea to me. Um, I'm glad we did this list. Let's talk about the two games that were eliminated and how many fan votes those received.
All right, so our 8 seed Catan that got eliminated by Magic the Gathering, and I have to say this: neither one of us thought this was going to happen until we broke it down.
Yeah.
Was our number 2 vote getter at 23.
Wow.
And Lost Cities, which was our 6th seed, was our number 3 at 5.
Wow.
Let me put that again. Our number 2 at 23, our number 3 at 5.
Yep.
And our number 1 game that's in our vote bracket that we have here,
Dungeons and Dragons.
it actually lost to an add-on game that we didn't include in here because it's not a board game.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons had like 45 votes or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. It was intense. All right, so let's move on to the finals. So now neither of us will pick a side. We are just going to simply break it down, see if any of them are immediately obvious to one another. And
well, I already have one, obviously.
Replay value?
Yep.
Yep. Replay value goes to Magic. Agreed. So replay value, and that's just, it's obvious. Replay value, it has more content, minimum number of plays for the full experience, and the only thing is player range and scale would go to Acquire.
Yeah.
But,
and that's only on a technicality.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, a game of Magic can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours, so who knows?
Yeah. Exactly. And the other one that jumps out of my mind, again, goes to Magic the Gathering as well.
Is that art and production?
Yep.
Yep. Art and production goes to Magic. I agree with that. Alright, so, let's talk about, I think, personally, meaningful choice goes to Acquire.
I have to disagree with you on that one.
Okay. What's your reason?
We talked about it when it went up against Catan, is that you have to think about how well you build your deck for the gameplay. That's a very important on your long-term strategy than it is to, say, Acquire. You have to make sure you have the proper thing, especially if you're in a competitive game of Magic the Gathering, like in a tournament or something like that. That's important. As well as impacting other players' strategies as well, because, like I said, if you constructed your deck very well and you get that card that you want out, how are you going to get it to the thing? Especially if he's taken away something that makes him say, "Hey, tap that land so you can't use it this turn," or stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's a very impactful on other player strategy as well as other arbitrary choices per se. It's beholden to how you draw your deck and how it's been shuffled. Yes, I'll give you that. Mm-hmm. Except for if you built your deck wrong or properly, then you won't really be super beholden to the shuffle because you have everything you need in there.
You have everything you need, yes, but I mean, if let's say 1/4 of the cards, which is the right amount of land that I need, if my first 15 turns are drawing land, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm just saying, that's where it's iffy to me, per se. But the other two in meaningful choices, I think, go to Magic for that reason. Is just because it's very important you build that deck properly.
Okay. I mean, long-term strat. But I think other people's strategies is more. I mean, yes, it's powerful in Magic, but really that's what Acquire is all about, is knowing when those stocks are going to flip, knowing when other people have what parts, knowing who has what stock. That is where you gain the advantage. Not can I make my deck work faster, it's can I figure out where everybody is and they're standing, and can I play the most optimal play for when I'm going to need to eventually sell my stock.
Why don't we just call this a wash? Because I'm not going to move from that. I think it's very important how you build your deck, and it will impact how the other person plays if you take out things that he needs based on, like, a spell card that you have.
Yeah. As for... So, we're talking long-term strategy is a wash. Impacting other strategies... Let's call the whole category a wash, honestly, because they're both so close.
We're going to sit here all day arguing this, and neither one of us is going to budge.
Right. Okay. So meaningful choice, it's a wash.
Yeah.
Immersion, theme matching mechanisms. does
Well,
go
I was going
to
to
a
go to
coin.
ease of play
Oh,
before we
okay.
go to game
Yeah,
immersion, because
let's go
that's
to
going to be an argument like we're not going to see tomorrow.
then let's be kind real quick. Ease of play. Simplicity or familiarity. Um, there's simplicity or familiarity. What do you think?
I think the simplicity of it has to go to acquire. As you mentioned earlier, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Magic is good, but there's a lot of moving parts that you're not see.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you
And
that.
there's a lot of reading too. You have to be a good reader to really,
Sure.
unless you have your cards exactly memorized and what
Right.
they do exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. There's a lot of variables to keep in play. So, simplicity goes to acquire. That's simple. AP prone.
Uh, I would give acquire that one. It's least likely to. It's not saying much. There's a lot of AP in it, but as you mentioned earlier, when you're
Yes.
playing with Magic the Gathering, unless you have your deck memorized and know exactly what they're going to do, even then, you're beholden to like, do I put this out now? Do I put it out later?
Yeah.
Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I put this out? Do I tap this land to bring this out? It's a
Yep.
lot going on because you're trying to figure out what your opponent's doing, what you have on your field, what you have in your hand, and what you're afraid your opponent may have in their hand. Especially when it comes to tournaments, as we go back to it, you pretty much know what your opponent's going to have because you kind of keep up with what your opponents are doing
Right.
in the tournament too, what cards are possible in their deck, and so that leads to a lot more where you have to think about what's going on, which leads to a lot more analysis paralysis.
I agree with that. I mean, so much to the point where they have a sideboard. You have AP between the games.
Yeah.
Anyway, but likelihood of getting to the table, Magic.
Magic, but
We'll give it that. But the category still goes to acquire.
yeah.
All right, so far we have 2-1 and a wash. Immersion. I'm saying
We match the mechanism. I think that
yes.
personally goes to acquire because you feel like you're playing the stock market. And when I'm playing Magic, yeah, I'm playing cards, and yeah, I'm a spell slinger, but we have a lot of Magic butts that do different things.
Which let's point out, that's the first time we brought up the theme of Magic.
Yeah.
That's how little the theme has to do with it. Yes, technically you're a wizard making spells. But how does the random factors come into play? Or how does it describe when you're trying to get mana to cast these spells where you somehow already know how you're going to cast them, you just can't. Like, what?
But that's the curse for any living card game or
Sure.
Collectible card game, whatever you want to call it. It's just that, in all honesty, you're just playing cards out there. You compare this to, say, something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Am I really playing monsters? Am I really a... Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, where it's like you're playing a card game, so...
Well, the one... I have a good example of... or two good examples of TCGs that break that mold is Pokemon actually does... it plays very similar to the video games. But then Transformers, the collectible card game, was very much... like, the way you're transforming you guys, they come out in the field already ready to go, and who you transform to gain what abilities, that breaks it. And even Tomb Raider, the collectible card game, breaks that mold. You're cooperative delving in a dungeon. That has nothing to... So, I don't know. The fact that Magic is so unthematic and even comparing to other CCGs, nah. It doesn't get it. Now,
but player interaction.
Yeah.
I give that to Magic in all honesty.
We have to give that part to Magic because
there's a whole community built on player interaction.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if I had a T-shirt that said untap, upkeep, draw, like there's a whole group of people that are gonna know what I'm talking about and either enjoy that or cringe at it.
Magic know what untapped or, in fact, most card games they don't say it, but every time you're playing it, because tapping your land or whatever is copyrighted, they still call it the tapping, even though it's not what it's called on the game itself. It's just something that's ingrained in you.
Yep, and as far as memorable moments go, that also goes to Magic.
Magic, yep.
So, which means that out of 3.5 of the 5 categories going to Magic the Gathering, our best game made last century, according to our debate, is Magic the Gathering.
Honestly, I can't disagree with it.
Nope, I can't.
I like El Grande a lot more. I like For Sale a lot more.
Yep.
I love Pitch Car a lot more than Magic the Gathering, but there's a reason why we honestly, by our criteria, think this is the better game, and that's why it's been around for nearly 30
Right.
years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I agree that it's, it regardless of whether our biased enjoy, because like I said earlier, Bonanza, if you said let's play Bonanza or Magic the Gathering, I'm picking Bonanza hands
Oh
down.
yeah, I agree with you on that. Or Can't Stop, for that matter.
Right.
I'd
But
probably play Can't Stop over most of these games on this list. I think the only one for sure that I'd play over Can't Stop is maybe For Sale, just because it's so quick.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean it really goes to show the staying power of Magic. So
Yeah,
congratulations, Magic the Gathering, congratulations, Richard Garfield. And that was another successful top 8 debate.
sure, it was.
Yeah, it was, well, over the course of 2 days. So if you're
And
watching
a
this
lot of
live,
editing on my part.
yeah, well, thank you in advance for doing that. If you're watching this live with us, stick around, hang out with us so you can join in on figuring out what our next week's top 8 debate will be. But if you want to ever email us at a later time, give us suggestions, ideas, disagree or agree with our ideas, go for it. Email us at everydayboardgames2020@gmail.com.
As well as you can find the re-uploads of these videos on YouTube at Everyday Board Games Podcast 2020. You can also find the audio versions found on most podcast platforms under Everyday Board Games Podcast, which would, in those places, could be include Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, and Podbean.
Join us live at twitch.tv/everydayboardgames and join in on the discussion.
And you can always also get in contact with us on Twitter at EBG Podcast.
So, as always, I've been Daniel.
And I've been Daniel.
And we want to thank you for tuning in to Everyday Board Games Podcast.
Have a good one.